In today's video, I'm going to make a chisel, but not a regular one. It's going to be pretty fancy. I'm going to make it from this piece of Damascus that my mate and Mastersmith Jackson Rumble made. He gave it to me a few years ago, and I've been waiting to use it on something special. The handle will be made of ivory micarta instead of real ivory with twisted flute and a silver inlay. It definitely won't be for everyday use. This one's just about the enjoyment of making it and trying to make something special using a few techniques that I haven't tried before. I'll start with the micarta, which I'm going to have a go at making using the paper from this pad. I couldn't find any ivory micarta in Australia, the size that I needed, so that's why I'm making it. I'm doing this first so it can set while I work on the blade. The difficult thing was finding paper that was off-white, and this seemed like the best option. Most paper is too white, then the next option is beige, but all of those look totally wrong, so hopefully this is about right. I'm repurposing the front cover of the notebook that I just cut up as a smooth surface to work on. I've not made micarta before, but it looks pretty straightforward. It's basically coating each piece of paper with epoxy, stack them together, and then put some pressure on it while it sets. There'll be enough here to make two handle blanks, so if anything goes wrong while making the handle, I'll have a second chance. There's nothing difficult about this, but it's taken a while as there's 180 pieces. Here's a clamping form that I made ready to squeeze the paper stack together. It's just hard wooden bolts with packing tape lining the inside to hopefully release the micarta block when it's set. That took about half an hour. I'll wrap them in a fresh sheet of greaseproof paper and put them in the form. The goal of this project is to have fun and draw inspiration from Jackson's work. The design is definitely influenced by it. Obviously, I'm no Mastersmith, so I don't expect to reach those sort of standards, but I'm going to give it a good go. I'm pretty happy with how that went. Hopefully it was worth making my own rather than buying it. I just hope that it's consistent throughout the block and that it actually looks somewhat like ivory. Now onto the blade. The first thing to do is remove the stub, which Jackson would have used to hold the billet with tongs while making it. I could just grind these shoulders off and then weld a tang on the end and insert that into the handle. That would work, but a chisel really should have a bolster somewhere for the handle to push up against. So instead, I'm going to forge these in from the side here, and that will make the centre swell, and that will give me my bolster. I'm pretty nervous about this process. I only get one go at it, so hopefully I don't ruin Jackson's work. Usually when I forge something, I'll have more material to have another go, and because I'm no blacksmith, that happens quite often, so fingers crossed this works out. That's the bolster section formed. Now I'll neck down the neck section and draw that out into a tang, and that's for the handle to locate onto. The shape of the bolster section will need refining, which I'll do later on the lathe. I should mention that there's a section on the end of the bar which isn't patterned. It's a piece of plain steel just to support the end of the Damascus when the final tiles were forge welded together. Anyway, that's the section that I'm using for the tang. Keep this in mind as it does play out as a significant part of the project. I'll just square up this face, and in the process it will upset the bolster a touch more. That seemed to go well, and I don't think that I ruined anything, so next I'll grind the main section. I want to square it up so I can reference off it for the rest of the build. My surface grinder is a very basic model and doesn't have any adjustable stops, so I swapped out the pin that stops the table at the end of the travel with a piece of aluminium. This gives me a bit more room to get the grinding wheel over where I need it. I realise that I'm feeding into the grinder in the wrong direction, but I'm taking very light passes and there's no problems at all. The stop pin is bent over from years of use, but I can take advantage of that. By swiveling it around, I can use it as a fine adjustment to get the stop in just the right place. Maybe in the future, if I find the time, I may retrofit some adjustable stops. When I finished the second side, I did flip it back over and made a couple of finishing passes back on the first side. Next, I'll mill the edges. I've etched the bolster area to check where the pattern ends. I've been a bit worried about it, that I didn't get it quite right. And you can see here that the pattern finish is short of the bolster. It's very disappointing and I don't really know what to do about it. I'll keep going though. I'll put it on the lathe and turn the bolster around. Before I do that though, I'm going to take the corners off, which will give me a bit more room to play with. Going back to the pattern falling short, I made a stupid mistake when forging it. I had a plan and made a mark where to set the bolster in. For some reason, I think I was concentrating on how to film the forging. I made a stupid decision to move the mark back. I'd looked at it and thought that it didn't seem quite right and changed it without thinking it through. As I said, I'll keep going and I'll figure out what to do about it later. I'm using the 4-jaw chuck to hold the chisel, which needs dialing in. I haven't done this too many times before, but it's pretty straightforward. Just find the lowest point on one side, then match that to the other by adjusting the jaws, and then exactly the same for the edges. The bolster doesn't need to be big, it's just something for the handle to sit up against. In my drawings I made it at 14mm, but while turning it I stopped at 15mm because I like the look of it there. I'll square up the end face as far as I can, then later I'll manually finish that up to the tang. I'll just remove a bit more material from the shoulders to give me more room for the next step, which is cutting a taper onto the bolster. I could have got to this point without any real precision, just working by eye, and that probably would have worked out fine, but this way I know everything is going to be straight and in line, which will make the rest of the project run smoothly. It looks a bit funny, but it should come together. Next I'll grind in the shoulders. It looks better already. Now I'll finish the transition from the flat into the bolster. I'll do that with the integral bolster attachment on my Broadbeck grinder. I've milled a piece of scrap aluminium to bridge over the belt, which I can use as a stop. This should give me a clean grind and repeatable on both sides. I'm putting no pressure onto the main flat area, so that doesn't get ground at all, just the transition. I reckon that's starting to look better. I'll put the blade aside for a moment and see how the micarta turned out. One bolt kept spinning, so I had to grind that off. I wasn't expecting it to come out so easy, and the form could be used again with a new bolt. I reckon it looks promising. I'm really looking forward to working on the handle. It's a pretty cool process that I'll be attempting, but I'll be patient and keep working on the blade for now. The next step is to grind bevels onto the back of the chisel. This will form a spine, and this is totally for aesthetics. I really liked it while playing around with different ideas when I designed it. As well as grinding the back bevels, the chisel also needs to taper down to the cutting edge. I could have just kept this parallel, but this will be far more elegant. To help grind it at the belt grinder and keep things fairly accurate, I'll fix the blade to a piece of squared hardwood. I'll use a stop on the table and angle it over to 8 degrees. I can't see the scribe tapered line along the edge as it's facing down towards the table. It isn't difficult though to grind to it by checking and making adjustments where to put a bit more pressure. The key is to be patient and not be too aggressive. This side's a bit easier as I can see the line and where to grind to. I changed the belt to 120 grit. The first one I think was 50. It's not looking too bad. Next I'll tidy up the shoulders by adding chamfers, and I'll do that with a file. I could do this on the belt grinder, but it'd be easy to mess it up by going too far too fast, and I feel safer doing it with a file. I don't want to ruin it at this point any more than I have already with the pattern falling short. I still need to think of a way of how to fix that, or I could just live with it I suppose, but I don't think I'd ever be happy with it. I am refining the chamfers on the belt grinder. It's pretty safe though, as I'm using a super fine belt, so I can't get into too much trouble. I'm doing another quick etch just to see how the edge of the pattern lies now that I've shaped around the bolster. The front almost reaches to the end of that radius, which may look okay. The back doesn't actually matter, as the back of a chisel needs to be polished anyway, which will hide the mismatch. I'll keep going and think some more about it while I clean up the tang. Now I can move on to the next part, which is a second bolster, and I'll make that from this mild steel. I realised it was a touch too small, so I'll have to make it from this piece, which is a bit bigger than I need, but easy enough to turn down. I will need to work on it more. The outside shape will need to be oval, but first I'll work on fitting it to the tang. Now that I've opened it up enough, I can use my die filer to open it up some more. That's about as far as I'll go with the die filer, so I'll finish the rest with hand files. There's a few things I've got to think about. The front of this bolster needs to line up with this one, and also the tang is tapered, so I have to take that into account, and also the tang is slightly off center, so I'll keep filing away and hopefully I can get it to sit up tightly here and in line. It's not a quick process, but I'm slowly getting there, making adjustments as I go to keep it aligned. Nearly there. Now I just need to make some clearance where the tang meets the bolster. I can see where it makes contact, where the Sharpie gets removed, then work on that area, test again, and so on until it fits. That's just about there, a bit of a touch up with the Dremel, and that will do it. It's looking pretty good, but there's still a bit of shaping to go. The front needs to stay round so it matches this bolster here, but on the other side I need to make that into an oval so it transitions into the handle. To keep the oval even, I'll file facets in it first. They can be measured to keep some accuracy, and they can also be compared to each other for shape and size. This method works very well and surprisingly accurate. Once I'm happy with the facets, I can chamfer them, which again can be kept quite even just by eye. When they're done, I put more layout fluid on the chamfers and then chamfer the chamfers, and from there I start to round them out. It's starting to get somewhere, and I really like it looking down from this angle, but less so from the side. There's a bit of a hump there, so I need to take that out and make it straighter from the back of the bolster to the front. That's much better. I think now is a good time to start working on the handle and take a better look at the micarta. I'll square the blank on the belt grinder. Even though the handle will be rounded, it will be much easier to start with a square and accurate block. That looks right, so next I'll drill a hole for the tang to pass through. To fit the handle onto the blade, I'll be making threads on the end of the tang, and then an end cap will screw onto that and hold it all together. I need to make a recess here so the end cap can go down and reach the end of the tang, so I'll drill that out next. To speed things up, I modified the one end of a cheap Riffler file, which works great. This actually doesn't need to be an amazing fit, as I'll be doing a process later which will make it a perfect fit. Now I need to work on the fittings for the other end of the handle, but first I'll cut threads onto the end of the tang. I'm just rounding it by eye. I've made threads like this a few times before on uneven or square bar, and it amazes me how well they come out. Next I'll make an end cap from the same piece of steel as the secondary bolster, as they'll get finished the same, so best to use the same material. I'll also need to make the nut from the same steel as well. I won't part it off the whole way, as it will be easier to work on. Just like the secondary bolster, this also needs to be made into an oval. I'll mark the centre and use that to align the piece upright in the vise. When I've done one side, I can rotate it 180 degrees and do the other. I just need to file a chamfer around the edge. I've gone through the grits and got it to a pretty high finish, and while I was doing that, I took the bolster to the same level too. Now back to the lathe and making the nut. As I said, I want these pieces from the same piece of steel, which means I have to remove a fair amount of material for this piece. With the nut done, I can fit it all together for the first time. It looks a bit like a chisel, but there's still a fair way to go yet. The nut needs some sort of feature so I can get a grip on it to tighten it and really clamp it all together. I thought about a slot, but instead I've decided to mill scallops around the edge. I'm using a hex collet block to mill the 6 scallops. I reckon it looks great and it adds a bit of interest. Next I'll quickly make a wrench to tighten it. I'll do that with this piece of brass, and this is the perfect job for the Wazer. I've set the file up and saved it to an SD card, so let's clamp the brass down and cut it out. I just need to file the tabs and that will fit perfectly. I mentioned earlier about getting the handle to fit perfectly, so I'll deal with that next. The idea is to bed the tang hole in the handle onto the tang with epoxy. I need to apply Vaseline to the tang and anywhere that I don't want the epoxy to stick to. The idea of this process is after it's done, the handle always goes back on in the perfect position. I'm just using 5-minute epoxy for this. It isn't the strongest epoxy, but it doesn't need to be. I'm putting the blade down onto a piece of plywood that's just the right thickness, and this will keep the flats of the handle on the same plane as the blade. I left it for an hour, so let's take it back apart. That took some moving, but it went with a bit of effort. It's not budging and I hope I haven't ruined it, so I'll have to get a bit more heavy-handed. I think I should have taken it off after about 10 to 15 minutes and maybe used more Vaseline as well. Whew. I honestly thought that I might have been cutting it off and remaking the handle, but I got there after a bit of a wrestle. There's still one last thing to deal with for alignment. I need to add pins to the end cap so it always locates in the correct position. First, I need to make a couple of soft jaws to hold the end cap while I drill it. If I've worked this out correctly, the jaw should automatically align the end cap while clamping it. That's worked great. Now I can move on to the handle. I'll mark out the ends while it's together. I'll transfer the marks onto the faces so you can see them while I shape it, and you can see I've also marked around the widest point of the handle to use as a guide as well. I'll just do this by eye using the marks as guides and try and match each side to the opposite side. Now I'll start removing the corners, trying to keep them all even. I'm also not going all the way to the line. I want the handle to be slightly larger at the ends. Keeping each corner even and consistent to each other really does work very well. It looks great, and the chisel tang makes a perfect mandrel to hold the handle while I refine it and sand it smooth. I'm just checking the ends, which are the most important bit to get right. They have to match the bolster and the end cap. I want them to be slightly larger. I'm sanding up to the line without removing it. I'm very happy with that. Now for the fun part and the bit that I've been looking forward to, fluting the handle. I made this jig off camera to help with the process. I can put it in the vise, lock the handle in position and quickly loosen, reposition and tighten it down again. First though, I need to mark out the flutes, and the mandrel off this jig will be useful for that too. I've also lasered these couple of discs to help with marking out as well. I'm using the hexacollic block again to mark 6 segments around the handle. Because the mandrel is a loose fit to the tang slot, that's why I've added the discs. I'll centre the handle to the discs and lock it down. I've also drilled a hole in this block to hold the mandrel at the correct height at the other end. That worked great. Now I need 6 segments around the handle, but that's easy enough to do with the height gauge. The flutes will be spiralled around the handle, so now I need to join each square of the grid diagonally. That's it. Now I'm ready to make the flutes. There's one more thing to do for the jig. It needs rubber washers to grip the ends of the handle while protecting them at the same time. I quickly made those on the wazer. I did a few extras in case I needed to stack them and make more clearance while working near the ends of the handle. You can probably see that I made the jig adjustable for different length handles, and also if I wanted to add those extra washers, but it worked out that one either end is enough. I reckon that's going to be great. There's going to be a bit of work in this, so I'll sit down for it, get comfortable and listen to an audiobook. I'll start with a triangular needle file and establish a groove for the silver wire to seat into. As I make more passes, I'll be able to make more adjustments and neaten up any sections that need it. Now that I've established the grooves, I'll swap the needle file for a tool that I made from a hacksaw blade. And by the way, the jig and this tool were recommended by Jackson to make the job easier. I should also say that Jackson has been a huge help throughout the project. We've been talking regularly and he's given me heaps of advice. This gives a consistent width to the groove. I won't go too far though just now. At first I'll prepare the silver wire so I can test fit it in the groove as I go. I went for Argentium silver as it doesn't tarnish as easily as sterling silver. It's already annealed, meaning it's soft, which is what I need as I'm going to twist 2 strands together. If it wasn't annealed, the wire would probably snap in the process, especially as I'm going to try twisting them quite tightly. I was worried how that was going to go, but it worked very well. I know I haven't gone deep enough yet, but now I've got something to gauge it. I'm aiming for the wire to sit halfway down into the groove. And by the way, the wire is 0.5 millimeter thick. That's each strand, so with the twist it works out a bit over 1 millimeter. I haven't really shown it, but I'm using the teeth of the saw blade as a depth guide as well as testing with the wire. I'm getting there with the wire grooves, so the next step is carving the flutes in between. This will really add some shape to the handle, and if I get it right, it should look very cool. I actually watched Jackson present a demonstration a few years ago at the Australian Knife Symposium on how to do this process, and I've wanted to try it since. I'm staying well away from the grooves and establishing the flutes. As they get a touch deeper, it'll be easier to keep the file in the flute without any fear of it slipping out. I'm working on one flute at a time and then moving on to the next one, and when they're all done I go round again and make another pass. It's slow going and I'm really enjoying this. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, and I'm also glad that I made that jig. As the flutes get deeper, I'm making more dust, so I'm going to set up in the woodwork side of the workshop and set up some dust collection. It doesn't look much like ivory at the moment, but hopefully when it's completed to a polished finish, it will. I'm aiming to leave a 0.5mm ridge on either side of the wire groove. To see the ridges a bit better, I'm highlighting them with pencil lead. I'm super happy with how that's looking. Now that they're shaped, I can start sanding. To help with that, I'll use this file wrapped in masking tape. The taper of the file will help, as the flutes are a different width as they wrap around the handle. With the taper of the file, I can find a section of it the correct width with the part of the flute that I'm working on. I'm starting with 120 grit. I'll go through all of the grits: 180, 240, 320, 400, 600, 800, 1000, 1200, 1500, 2000, and then finish with 2500. I'm on to the finer grit, so as there's very little dust being made, I've turned off the dust collector. I couldn't hear it anyway as I'm listening to my book with noise cancellation. It took a long time to file the flutes, and this probably took just as long. I'm trying to remove all of the scratches from the previous gritted sandpaper. It's getting there though, and really starting to look awesome. Now I have to sand the ridges, which are much easier and don't take as long. As I've sanded the ridges, I just need to check the depth of the wire grooves again. I didn't show it, but I put some Renaissance wax on the handle before buffing it. At a glance, it really does look like ivory. I had to take a quick look at it fitted on the blade. I reckon it looks great, so I'll get back to the blade and heat treat it. I would have done this earlier, but Jackson advised that I coat it in an anti-scale compound, which I had to order. This does just as it says. It stops scale forming on the surface of the steel. I left that to dry while I got the forge up to temperature. I left it in there for 10 minutes or so and then quenched it in vegetable oil. The blade not unexpectedly warped in the heat treat, but to straighten it, I'll clamp it to a piece of steel while I temper it in the oven for a couple of hours. Hopefully this should do the trick, and if you're wondering why the steel goes in the oven, the heat treat that we just done makes the blade super hard but also brittle. This will soften it back a touch in a controlled way, making the blade strong again but still hard enough to hold an edge. That did the trick. It's straight enough, as I need to re-flatten the back anyway. The belt grinder is a good place to start, but the back of a chisel needs to be super flat, and that's not going to happen on a belt, so I move over to the disc grinder. It's not too bad, but I will flatten it more later on stones. Next I'll grind the edges, and I want them to be angled over slightly. To do that, I'm bending over a piece of angle that I can use as a support on the surface grinder. With the stop on top of the fly presser, I can get a pretty consistent bend. I did quickly sand the relevant surface on the belt grinder, which will be good enough for this purpose. Now I can start to finish the blade, getting it sanded, ready to etch and reveal the pattern. This took hours to sand. I'm sanding along the blade with one grit, and then the next grit I do that at an angle until I can't see any of the scratches from the previous grit, and then so on until it's done. Before I etch it, I'll grind on the front bevel. I keep thinking that I'm ready to etch and reveal the pattern, but I just need to add my logo. To etch the blade, I have a container of ferric chloride. I have another with just water for rinsing, and a third one with a bicarb solution for neutralising at the end of the etch. It really is an incredible pattern, and I think Jackson may be a wizard. After a few minutes, I rinse the blade, then clean it up with wire wool, put it back in the ferric chloride, and repeat the process 6 times. Next, I'll soak it overnight in coffee. This will add more contrast and make the pattern pop. It does this as the pattern is made up from 2 different types of steel, and the coffee affects one of them more than the other. That looks amazing. One thing I should have done is put a resist on the back. I could have spray painted it or used vinyl. Now I have to sand it back. It actually isn't going to take too long, and as I said earlier, I was going to stone the back anyway. I haven't shown it because I don't want to bore you, but I spent 2 days trying to flatten and polish the back, and I'm still not happy with it. As hard as I try, I just can't get the scratches out. Anyway, now I need to do something about the pattern falling short at the bolster. I have a plan. I wouldn't say that I'm super confident, but I'm going to try something out. I've decided to laser a groove to isolate the bolster section, which I'll then blacken and hopefully hide my mistake. I made vectors from a photo with guides to line up the logo and a center line. It looks good, so I'll turn off the guides and etch the grooves. The grooves need to carry on around the side, so I'll etch those next. The tricky part of this is lining them up to the grooves that I've just etched. Another thing I'm not super happy with is how messy my logo looks against the pattern of the Damascus. They're competing with each other, but blackening it should improve that as well. The Damascus is really quite raised, so I'll sand it back smooth and then sandblast it. I'm sandblasting it to define that section and make it different to the rest, and also the different steels will hopefully blacken more evenly. That looks pretty neat, so let's get on and blacken it. I've also decided to re-blacken the Damascus too, as it got a bit faded with all the manhandling when I spent 2 days polishing the back. Instead of the coffee etch, I thought I'd blacken it now while doing the bolster with the blackening solution. Hopefully that works out okay. I'm doing it a few times using wire wool on the pattern, and I think it worked well. This is the blackener that I used, and it came with this fixing oil, so I'll put that on next. I left it sat there for about 20 minutes and then put it in the vise so it could drain off overnight. I reckon it looks awesome. I'm pretty happy with the fix, so now I'll finish the handle. The first thing I need to do is make the grooves carry around onto the ends. The wires will go through into the tang hole and then they get pulled back upwards, locking it in place. This is another process I've been worried about, as it would be disastrous if I ruin the handle at this point. I just need to make a small groove for the tail to sit in. That's one end done, now the same on the other end. They're all done, so let's wrap the wires. I'm pulling the tail back up and that locks the wire in, but I will add CA glue as well, as it doesn't hurt. With pliers, I push the wire down, which pulls the wire really tight around the handle. I didn't do it on this one, but on the next ones, I push the wire down and then back up in one action to lock the tail of the wire. That's one done and it went well, so I'll get on with the others and then start to finish things up. It's hard to believe that was just a stack of paper and some resin. I couldn't be happier with the handle. I think it's awesome. I'm having a quick look before I assemble the chisel properly. I do need to finish these last few steel parts though. I've decided to glue them over heat. They need a last sand and that's actually taken another couple of hours. I'll clean them in the ultrasonic cleaner for 10 minutes and then get on to bluing them. I've not done this before other than a quick test, but heating over brass chips gives an even heat. When the part turns to the desired colour, I put that onto the steel table, which acts as a heat sink and cools it down straight away, keeping that colour. When I've seen this done before, it seems to be on small parts like watch hands or tiny screws. These pieces have a fair amount of mass to them and they really needed quite a lot of heat. They're not perfect, but they do look pretty cool. I've decided to have one more go at polishing the back and this ended up being another couple of days. It's better, but there's still scratches in there, but I've got to stop before I go crazy. I've also decided to polish the front bevel. I could have kept the pattern and I've been trying to decide what to do, but I reckon a polished bevel will look neater. I would have had to sharpen the cutting edge anyway. I'm just doing the whole thing instead. I did even consider a hollow grind, but the chisel isn't going to get used, so I didn't see the point. I'll put some wax on and then I can finally assemble it. I was going to epoxy the handle and fittings on, but because that would be permanent, and I'm still thinking that I may work on it some more, polishing the back and maybe even rebluing the steel parts, I thought it would be best to just screw it together for now. Let's give it a go and pair some wood. This is probably the only time that I'll ever use it. You never know, I may pair some wood somewhere down the line, but I'm pretty sure that I'll never strike the end of it. So even though I've made it as a showpiece, it does show that it is a great chisel and it could definitely be used. I may at some point ask someone for some help to get to the finish that I want. I know it's good and I'm 99% of the way there, but I know many knife makers who just wouldn't be quite happy with the finish. They really are incredible makers. It shows, as I always say, I'm no expert, I'm just giving it a go. I just need to point out that I really am over the moon with it. I hope that I made Jackson proud, even though I nearly ruined his steel. A huge thanks to him, not only for the Damascus, but for all the advice. It ended up being an epic project. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.